Can everybody hear me? Thank you. I was a university lecturer for many years. I loved it, but I don't want to lecture at you today, so I'm going to stay seated here. I don't want to take up too much time. I've got a simple observation to make, a response, a query, and then an invitation, and that's an invitation that goes out to everyone in this room. So I moved to New Zealand in 2010, came to Christchurch a few months before the earthquakes. Then we had the earthquakes. And afterwards, my experience was I was really impressed by the way people came together in the response to a disaster. But very soon I was worrying that it would all go back to normal very soon. And it did. We got caught up in a bureaucratic morass. So I guess I'm really interested, Emma, what you told us today, because you didn't just tell us how amazing your community was in responding to a truly devastating impact, but you've also told us about learning lessons and doing things differently. So it suggests to me that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or you can tell me otherwise, that it seems to me there's an experiment happening here in how to build a restorative community, how to build a resilient community. I'm tremendously excited. We need the case studies, we need the real experience. I wrote some silly notes for myself yesterday. They were from the Post-Carbon Institute on 6 foundations for community resilience. It's worth reading, but I really don't want to bore you with some academic stuff. So I guess I'm really excited. I'd love to know, Emma, do you feel like the challenging experiences you've been through, the ways you've mobilized people, the programs you're continuing now, do you think this is going to lead to improved community resilience? Is this different, or is everyone just going to go back to normal?
I think largely a lot of communities have gone back to normal, but there are some that have definitely learnt. And so what happened after the cyclone is that we had so many pop-up community hubs all throughout Hawke's Bay. They dealt with the immediacy of the cyclone and people without housing and food. And most of them within 3 months of the disaster had closed down. But the ones that had continued were our very strong marae and Tai Whenua network. It's their core business to look after people, and they've done very well, and they continue to do that. I do think what it has left, especially in the communities that don't have the resources that they need in any given time, an appetite to do more. And so the 8 communities that we've chosen to work with and who want to work with, so we haven't imposed anything, we've had people come to us to ask, I'd say half of them are largely low decile communities that would like to think for the future and be ready for a just transition. A quarter of them would be rural communities that realise that they're not ready and don't have the surrounding social infrastructure and food resiliency in place. And then the other 2 are working with marae to look at what long-term resiliency looks like. And so I think with those 8, I'm hoping that we have a living case study of what could be done in different communities, but led by the community, so everyone will be different. I don't think there's one answer to what we're doing. I think every community has different needs and it will look different at the end of it. So I'm hopeful that that's where we could end.
Oh, thank you so much for that. So I mentioned I had an invitation as well. So I noticed you mentioned all these different networks. We had Tapatahi mentioned yesterday. You've mentioned the Enviro Hubs of Aotearoa Network. I've been involved the last few years as a trustee of Christchurch Enviro Hub. And I feel really guilty because I haven't introduced degrowth ideas. And I feel really guilty as well because I know you guys have been up on the North Island doing stuff, and some of you are connected with IHA. And this is a global network, all these environment hubs all around the country, and yet we haven't mobilized as a network nationally to support you, learn from you, so that we can get benefits for all of us, because we know, as Nate Hagen's told us, The road ahead is closed. So the invitation is, it's something, a conversation Jack and myself started with our colleague Nathan, who couldn't be here today, is we thought, what can we do to put together a project to complement what is already happening, to support other people for community resilience? And we did wonder, we thought, and you're going to hear more about it today, there's all these amazing things happening, all sorts of circular economy initiatives, repair cafes, all lots of grassroots community initiatives. And I do wonder though, do they all have the joined up thinking, the broader vision of the challenge we're facing? It sounds to me, Emma, like your communities are beginning to get it, and get it for real. But I wonder whether we can do more. So can we put together a project? Can we produce resources, perhaps, to support communities? Can people with the expertise help and go out there, and maybe we can get something going? I don't know if you want to add to that, Jack, but this is my invitation. Yesterday, Mawera, great. Yesterday, Mawera says, let's do something and let's make an impact. That session was incredible. So I just wanted to put the invitation out. Let's talk about this. Come talk to me. There's a hand up there.
Kia ora, Jen. This is Sonia. Good morning, everybody. My question is around, so we've talked about different causes of our converging crises. What I see them as is fundamentally a lot of that kōrero is superficial, symptomatic, we've talked about that as well, and the foundational crisis, from my perspective, from what I was trained in Mātauranga Māori as well, is, Māori and Indigenous knowledge, expert wisdom and such, it's a crisis of consciousness. And some of us, we heard quantum physics yesterday, that was kind of glossed over. And I'm like, whoa, stop the bus. Focus on that area, because what quantum physics tells us is that consciousness is the basis of all reality. And what that tells us is we have this asset as, well, Māori think of ourselves as, divine beings, co-creative. We have the co-creative power of the atua, supernatural beings with us. So this is not news to us. But what we're seeing is a lot of people are just stuck. They can't actually, we're calling on all these people to mobilize, come on over, act. They're stuck. We should interrogate, why is that? I think, and a lot of my Indigenous networks think, because I belong to an international Indigenous network of matriarchs who share our wisdom every full moon about these topics, metaphysics, right? To get people emotionally strong to face what is here and what's to come. Now, you don't have to be religious. I'm not talking about that. But if, you observe, there's a triangulation going on. Religious, like faith-based narratives, science, like high-level science, quantum physics, and Indigenous wisdom, all saying the same thing. We are powerful co-creators, but you've got to believe that to shift. People are in grief. They can't metabolize their grief. What I'm saying is a project that everyone can get into, because we're all human beings in this meat suit, experiencing, humanity, but we're essentially wairua. We can have a conversation about that, and I think we should, because that's the crisis we're experiencing. We don't believe it. And so people are stuck, okay, scared, in grief, in te pō, So that I'm inviting anyone who's up for that, please come and talk to me, because I'm already working on that to build that kōrero. Especially our young people need it, especially. Kia ora.
May I make a very brief response to that wonderful contribution? I must admit, look, I've always been a bit of a fanboy. I was an anthropologist, and I got to have lovely adventures in South Asia and meet other communities. And part of the reason for that was I grew up and I realized over time that I was reacting to the alienation of living in a society of individualist consumerism. I grew up as the fanboy who wanted to understand what community was, for real. And I feel like we're at a moment where there's a lot of people, especially us, the Pākehā folk, who really need to rediscover community for real, who need to discover that loving each other is actually far more important than going to the shops. So I just wanted to give that kind of context that I've been there and I'm interested in the Indigenous knowledge side, And I really think that the values that we've got right now are all skew-if, and it is indeed a crisis of consciousness. So thank you very much.
I just want to add something to that too. So from a human behaviour change perspective, what I said before, I think feeds into what you've just said, which is we need to figure out a way of making the message more accessible. And what I did write it on there, I didn't say the words, but as scientists, we logic bully, right? Like, I'm totally guilty of it. I'm just going to give you more data and I'll change your mind. We know it doesn't work. We've got to find a way to speak to the hearts and minds of people. I don't know if any of you in the room have listened to Daniel Schmachtenberger's 3 3/4 hour podcast with Nate, which is like blows your hair back for all sorts of reasons. But in that, he talked about this idea that we can have knowledge without wisdom. And so I feel like often Western science, and including what I just said about human behaviour change, is probably in a knowledge silo, which is a very reductivist way to look at things, right? We just go down this one thing to find the solution, which we realise is not a good thing. I just talked about that. And we do that in a whole bunch of different silos, but we're often not good at having the overarching wisdom over those things. So you can ask someone, how do we best create a solar panel? But actually the wisdom question is, how do we best create a solar panel and not and not destroy the planet at the same time? You know, so we've got to bring those two pieces together and create a narrative that speaks to both the knowledge and the wisdom. Because I feel like I'm kind of the knowledgey bit as the Western scientist-y person, but I totally miss the wisdom, and I need, you know, I can speak for myself to say I need your leadership in that.
Kia ora. I'd like to tautoko what Catherine said and also what you've just said. I'm really noticing in these talks this morning, the heart is coming back. Without the heart, we are well and truly fucked. This is the beating centre of what keeps us alive, and it's also what informs us about what hurts and what brings joy. I want to quote Alex Cockle, who is currently on remand for sitting on a gantry, stopping cars on a motorway, in order to tell the government that we need radical change, we need to make even the smallest steps. And he said, if one person was suffering in front of me, I would do anything I can to help them. If 1 billion people were suffering in front of me, I would do whatever I can to help them. The heart is what makes us love community. The heart is what brings us together. In the understanding of Buddhism, there are 2 wings. One is wisdom and knowledge. The other is compassion and love. And without those 2, we are incomplete. And we will never reawaken from all the trances of consumerism, of hatred, of sheer denial and stupidity. As societies, we're all in a smoke room where we're sitting together, and because nobody's doing anything, we daren't raise the alarm and say, hey, this room is filling with smoke, you know, there's a fire going on here. Extinction Rebellion said, we are the fire alarm. And that needs to resonate not just in people's intelligence, but in their hearts. Because that's where the energy to act comes from. The blood that pumps round us. The breath that the heart pushes through.
Thank you.
So kia ora all.
Yes, thank you, Cass. Thank you, Cass. I just want to just make a quick little comment here that I'm so glad that you're all here, and that's why we needed 2 days. Today is the day for the hands and the heart, as I mentioned yesterday, and this afternoon's session, we will be talking a lot more about that. This morning still, we have a little bit more time, and we're really trying to talk about hands this morning as well. So to be thinking about a practical project was part of what we were hoping for with this conference. So I have a question, but there's also a burning question up here. And just very briefly, while I'm coming up, is there a question to you, Emma and Piers, is there a way that local communities, this is from my community, of working with civil defence or REMU, is there sense in trying to build an alliance there?
There absolutely is. I've had the privilege of just joining a little company called Resilient Organisations, and we work with civil defence. We provide emergency management training, and I can see, Jack said earlier, there's a convergence of emergency management and degrowth thinking, and I can see that these kinds of projects, they absolutely need it. When I talk to the climate resilience staff at Christchurch City Council, I know that they want to engage the community in more than just these kind of simplistic consultations. The challenges required cannot just be done by authorities to people, they have to be done with people. And we do need to build stronger relationships. So all the amazing civic society groups that Emma's spoken of, the councils need to be listening to them and working with them, in my view.
Hi, sorry, I just got one point to pick up from Helen. There are people working on the narratives work, and I'm going to a course on Tuesday by The Workshop, and I don't know if anybody has heard of that group in here or is from the workshop here, but they are doing courses that anybody can go on.
Can you repeat that? What is
The
it called?
Workshop. It's evidence-based narratives for change, working on research-based. What values, how can we communicate values to shift mindsets?
Cool.
Will that be publicly available once it's done?
They've got a website with heaps of resources on it.
I know about the workshop. The point is, will the work be available? Because sometimes they're held by whoever's paying for it. They don't then release that information.
No, anybody can go on the courses to learn how to craft narratives for change, and they also have the resources available on their website from the work that they've been doing in terms of the sorts of wording and the way to craft your wording to make those messages be more effective.
Right, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant specifically to do with degrowth. Yeah.
But they're covering climate change and similarly related issues that we're dealing with.
I just wanted to add to that. If people looked at Les Robinson's work, I read a book of his, Changeology, and you just need to Google him, and he has lots of stuff online. He's an Australian, and Helen, I really thought about him. Have you looked into his stuff? Really, really strongly recommend that you do, because it's how to move people to do things that they haven't previously done. It's lots of science-based stuff, but it's really, really useful. I just want to reflect something to the reflection on the Christchurch earthquakes. I come from Christchurch East. One of the things that we learned through the earthquakes was that it was actually really quite healthy and important to stay away from the authorities. And to say that we haven't been able to build back better, well, we had a huge amount of dislocation and dispossession. People were driven off their properties. Our communities were dislocated and destroyed in some cases.
Absolutely.
And it happened to the poorest part of Christchurch. Now, my husband and I, we had a munted house, but we're politically confident. We've got resources, we've got money, and we worked with our insurance company and our lawyer, and we stayed on our property. And that's one of the things that they say people need to do post-disaster, is they need to stay at home. They need to be supported to stay in their place. And that's not what happened in Christchurch East. So we could have done a lot better. And of course, we've got a lot of people, working class people in Christchurch East, who were disempowered. They knew they were disempowered. And the way that they reflected that disempowerment was to whinge. And the media went to all the whingers. So I just wanted to say something on behalf of our community when, you were sort of seeming to reflect that we didn't do as well as,
And
we might have done.
coming out of that as well. Like the Richmond Community Gardens, it's amazing.
So if I could add a comment to that, 80% of the cats that had microchips got repatriated after the Christchurch earthquake, and those who didn't have a microchip didn't. So please get your cats microchipped and keep them safe and happy at home. I wanted to comment about civil defence. So I was involved in my last job with the Animal Welfare chapter of the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. And I do think there is merit in building those relationships, but it's so difficult to make that meaningful in peacetime. And this is, this has been alluded to here. Like in crises, it stands up and it's great to have the network, but that only happens in response, right? It's the peacetime stuff that we need to build, those communities actually, when we're not facing the crisis, so that we've got that piece covered.
Okay. So we've heard a lot of macro stuff in the last couple of days. I'm really impressed with Nate's idea this morning of islands of coherence. And I'm a practical sort of a person. So I've planted literally hundreds of thousands of trees. I think what we need is models. We need bits of land. I've got a couple of bits of land that a mate and I have bought in the last few years, or more than one mate, and it's debt-free. So we don't need to be making a return off that land. We've got orchards planted. We kill a couple of big beasts a year. We make sausages for people we know. Like, what's the model you actually want? This is, to my view, is where we need to be going. We need to have. This complements our spiritual nature of stuff when we're not any longer being forced to pay the man. I'd like to see us have more a discussion on small scale, practical model making. And this is something we're trying to do at the moment. Thanks.
So, in response to that, sorry, can I just respond to that? One of the things that we need to be able to do is kill animals close to home, right? So there's someone in the room who's busy working on mobile abattoirs. You should go and talk to Solace. Put your hand up, Solace. I don't know if you want that attention, but there you go. So it's those sorts of things that practically we need to be able to provide as well, so we're not having to transport animals around in order to get them to slaughterhouses. So those initiatives are really important to be able to fulfil what you've just spoken about.
Mine's sort of a question, and it's, as Nate Hagen said, it's a complex predicament that can't yet be voiced publicly or politically. And it was prompted by Piers, your saying, about back to normal. This normal is used a lot, but we don't challenge what is normal. Normal family, normal workplace, they're all historic things, they change. So my question is, how do we challenge normal, which is just all the time? And how do we honestly acknowledge what is preventing constructive change? I love the core leadership, that's fabulous. So, what's stopping us? We don't here. The answer here. If we don't look at what is stopping, these answers going forward.
We have only a very limited time left, so let's all have that discussion and answer your wonderful question later. Let's see if we can get, there's so many hands that want to go up.
The comment was made that we have to pay the man. And that was the one that stuck in my mind. And it sticks in a lot of people's minds because that economic problem is the one that keeps us from forming the heart and community that we really need. It's our economic system that is tearing us apart and separating us. Yeah. And I think that you will probably hear from Deirdre Kent fairly soon, this afternoon, and she will probably have something to say about that. But the real problem is the money that we're using is being paid, we're paying people for owning things. And ownership doesn't produce anything. And when they pay people for things that they own, there's no limit to it. And that's why we have an unlimited consumption in this world.
Thank you so much.